Hi everyone, Matt here from WorkStory, here to give you a very brief walkthrough of a background of who WorkStory is, why we do things the way we do, how to set things up, and what the process actually looks like for an average team and an average team member. So a couple quick minutes of some background. Basically, everything we do is from the standpoint of traditional performance evaluation is just unhelpful. People don't look forward to it. It's a very negative experience. It takes up a lot of time. So what can we do to make that process better so that people will actually look forward to taking part and will actually learn and grow from the experience? So my favorite sort of visual way of explaining what we do, as you're all probably very well aware, the standard model of traditional performance evaluation has been once a year, let's get together for a conversation. Manager will fill out some stuff. Team member may fill some stuff out. And to us, that's not great. You certainly can't remember everything that's happened over the course of the year, even the past 6 months. So it ends up being a very inaccurate reflection of performance, a lot of recency bias based on whatever's happened over the past probably month or so, and highly subjective. Really, like how has Matt been performing over the course of the year on this Wednesday afternoon? It's just not a great way of having or kicking that conversation off. And it also opens us up to a lot of surprises where maybe the team member feels like they were performing differently, which is a hugely demotivating conversation to have. So anyway, if we had to illustrate our process, it would look something like this. Basically, let's take the questions we want to use to measure performance. Let's take questions to solicit feedback. Let's take goals, and let's continuously collect information about those things over the course of the year. So that one, from a operational or management perspective, whenever we want to have a performance review or simply sit down and have a check-in to talk about performance, the information is already collected. We don't have to take the time to sit down and write it out. It's already there, and it's easy for us to reference to have those more important conversations. Perhaps more importantly, from the perspective of the individual employee, if we want to share with them, they can have access to their feedback, their performance metrics, and have a general understanding of how well they're doing throughout the year, so they can be advocates for their own growth and development. And we can all sort of be aligned as we're moving through the year rather than surprised with the next conversation. So anyway, for us, ease of use, time savings, and giving everyone a much easier and more positive experience when it comes to growth, which is really the whole point of performance management. So quickly, how do we get this done? In our case, we'll try to automate as much as possible. Team members don't have the mental capacity or the time to go write feedback down. If they did, they'd be doing it already. They certainly don't want to go log into other systems to document all this stuff, and it's just not going to happen throughout the year. So in our case, we'll try to meet team members where they're already spending their time throughout the day, whether that be Microsoft Teams, Slack, WebEx, various email platforms. That's where we want to have our one-to-one interactions, so it takes them as little time as possible. So in terms of setup, part one is determining competencies. What areas of performance do we want to be measuring for the average team member? Ideally, we'd like to get this super specific to each role within the organization. WorkStory will actually work with you to craft a lot of these questions and competencies. You're welcome to bring in things like core values or any existing frameworks you have, but we'd like to sort of make it a collaborative experience because we have a lot of sort of knowledge from other organizations we work with and what we feel works well for them. But ultimately, it's up to the organization to customize and tailor as much as they need to make sure that they're collecting exactly the information that they need to have for those performance conversations. So anyway, part one, competencies, questions. Part two, if pertinent, goals, adding goals for team members adding goals for themselves. The most important aspect of this is how often we want to get progress updates on those goals. It could be once a month, once a quarter, maybe once weekly, depending on the time frame, whatever fits best. And then the last part of setup is review relationships, as we call them. Who do we need to be collecting feedback from? It can be traditional, sort of top-down manager to team member. It can also be 360 or whatever custom framework works best. Ideally, it's just who makes the most sense to get feedback from in an ongoing fashion throughout the year. Let's set up that relationship and also how often we want to be prompting those requests for input. So in some cases, we have organizations that like the manager to give input once a month, but peers, because they're working with each other quite frequently, are giving input to each other once every couple of weeks. We have the freedom to customize that however is needed. Once that setup's done, we basically flip a switch and the team is up and running, and they're just collecting information and eventually turning that into performance reviews. So with that, we'll hop into the actual process of what it would look like for an average team or a team member to be interacting with the WorkStory platform. So if we have a team that's using Microsoft Teams, here's my demo Teams account. Really, an average team member won't be doing anything with us up until the point at which they're sent a request for feedback, which looks something like this. So theoretically, I have a question that's come in for a team member named Jamie, who we work with, about one of her competencies. The system will basically look at Jamie and it'll say, okay, which of her competencies has been answered least and needs a little bit more volume? Let's pull a question out of there and send it to Matt in an effort just to keep everything balanced as we're progressing throughout the year. This is sent to me in a one-to-one chat with the WorkStory application. I'm the only one who sees this and interacts with this. So whenever I have a moment, my busy day, I'll stop, I'll take a second to answer this. Ideally, we want this to be like a 15 to 20 second interaction. So in this case, how effective is Jamie in fostering a productive work environment? I'll say she's exceeding expectations. I'll submit that. That response is not shared with Jamie in any way, shape, or form, even if Jamie's my manager. And then I'm prompted with as part 2, which is please give some context, give some constructive feedback as to, why you gave that specific answer or what Jamie could be doing to improve in this specific area. So I'll share a quick comment. Okay, there's my quick piece of feedback, hopefully keeping it constructive. And then I have some options in terms of visibility. Organizations can determine if they want to use all of these or just keep one. But ideally, we want team members to feel as comfortable as possible when sharing feedback so they can provide that constructive input, which is really what fuels the whole process. But anyway, it's a spectrum of just open to sort of anonymous. So do I want to share this openly with this person? We can talk about the feedback outside of the context of the system. Great, you can. Do I just want to share the comment? Would I rather share it with her manager directly? Would I rather share it anonymously? It's up to me with each opportunity to select which option I feel is best. In this case, I don't mind sharing it openly. So I'll click submit and I'm done. That's the entire review process for an average team member. In this case with Jamie, I won't receive another question for her for another 2 weeks. And that's really it. Go back to the work I was focused on and we'll just collect all this information passively over the course of 6 months, a given year, what have you. Similarly, goal updates work in the very same way. You'll get a message that says, hey Matt, it's time for you to update a goal. Do you want to provide a quick progress update? I do so directly within the channel of choice, and then I go back to my work. So with that being done, again, that's the front-end experience for a lot of team members. What do I then get access to? So we'll hop into the actual web platform now and show you around the various dashboards. So I'm not going to go through everything here. It's obviously, there's a lot going on. So I think the most important thing to do will be for us to hop into Jamie's dashboard, and we'll be able to see what I have access to as her manager, as well as what an average team member like Jamie would be able to see. So within Jamie's dashboard, which we'll occasionally invite her into if we elect to give her access, we have here the feedback feed. So front and center, here's all the feedback that I and or other team members have shared with Jamie over the course of the year, electing to share it with her, perhaps openly or not. We have a quick toggle here, which is this is the manager view of everything I can see it being her manager. And then we have Jamie's view, which is all the feedback she would be able to see depending on how the feedback was shared with those various options that we talked about earlier. If I'd like, I can always just write a quick feedback comment as well and capture that for her here. On the right-hand side, we have something really cool, which is one of the ways in which we're integrating AI into our mechanic. So once a month, provided Jamie has enough feedback and goal updates, we'll provide a quick summary of her performance. This is really just a time-saving device for, hey, team member or hey, managers, we're going to sit down and talk about performance rather than you having to read through all the feedback and distill it into the various themes. Here's a quick summary as well as some recommendations of items to focus on or opportunities to improve. Again, we'll produce one of those each month for each team member, provided they have enough data collected. Huge time saver, and a lot of teams are really leveraging that for their one-on-one conversations. Beyond that, we have a few other tabs here. So we have an analytics tab. We have some variability in terms of, do we want to share this with Jamie? We can share it completely if we want to. If we would rather share without the metrics and simply just share the qualitative labels, we can do that, or we don't have to share it at all. From my managerial perspective, I have access to some data here. So for Jamie, over the past 3 months, she has a score of 67 out of 100, which we have determined is meeting expectations. That's entirely customizable for each organization. We can see that's based on 36 reviews that have been completed. And there's also a sentiment rating, which is generally just, as we like to call it, a temperature reading. So with every feedback comment that's shared, we do a quick sentiment analysis to determine how positive or negative it is and give it a quick overall score as to how positive people are being when they're sharing feedback about Jamie's performance. Beyond that, we have a visual representation of performance for Jamie over time to make it easier to understand what's going on. And then I'll just expand the date range here a little bit. A breakdown of Jamie's competencies. So Jamie has a specific role assigned to her that has a set of competencies and questions. With each review question answered, that data funnels back to not only her overall score, but the specific competency as well. We can use this to very quickly and easily identify, for the purposes of a conversation, where she's doing well and where she might need to improve. I, as a manager, would also have some expectation, if we're sharing this with her, of her having an understanding of what she needs to be focused on throughout the year as well. So anytime we go into a conversation, it's not, hey, how do you feel you're doing? Or give me some updates. It's very much more targeted. So I can see here, okay, over the past 6 months, Jamie, doing really well when it comes to leadership, project contribution, not so well when it comes to media relations and perhaps working with others. So let's talk about those. Let's reference the feedback for those categories and see if there are any opportunities to improve, which again is really the whole goal of performance management in the first place. Beyond that, we have some manager-only sections here. This is just the running list of all the reviews for Jamie. I can edit or delete these as necessary. And then an awesome little breakdown to reviewers. So whoever has contributed information to Jamie, I can see how well they're reviewing her on average, what sort of sentiment they're sharing in their reviews, and the volume of reviews they've contributed to her performance. Separately, we have the goals tab for her. So these are Jamie's goals. She is tasked with updating these throughout the year, again, directly through Microsoft Teams, Slack, email, whatever the tool is. Rather than us asking her about her goal next time we have a one-on-one, instead, I know all of the progress updates that have already been collected, and we know exactly where things stand. I can always hop in here and provide my own quick comments if I feel like it would be helpful. Skipping ahead, we'll go to perhaps one of the more important features here, which is performance reviews. So administrators can create review cycles and push out reviews for everyone. In this case, I'm just going to create 1 or 2 reviews for Jamie to show you the more manual way of walking through the system. So we'll create a performance review for Jamie, really just follow the steps. So part 1 is just establishing what the review looks like and what information we're going to be covering. This case, the past year of performance, I'm not going to filter anything out. I don't mind including the scores on the report. And then here's where things get a little fun. One is basically there are 2 ways of doing a performance review. One is traditional, which is going through, reviewing all the information, providing my own comments. One is AI enabled. We'll go through that after the fact. Pure time-saving device there, which a lot of the teams that we work with really, really love. So a traditional review, in this case, over the past year, it's including 133 points of input, which is fantastic. Again, as opposed to, here's Matt and rating Jamie's performance on a Wednesday afternoon. So going next, following the steps, I'm going to skip ahead to the performance competencies. Rather than, again, to repeat myself, rather than Matt saying, okay, Jamie's a 3 out of 5 when it comes to collaboration, we feel that's just not helpful, too subjective. So instead, what we have here are, these are the scores for Jamie's competencies over the course of the entire year based on all the feedback that's been given from me and or any other team members. In this case, if I'd like, I'll open up the working with others competency and I can read through all the feedback comments that have been shared. If I'd like, I can produce my own comments or add some additional notes. I'll do something like, feedback to be discussed in the performance review conversation. And I can actually pull in some of these feedback comments if I'd like without the identifying information. And I'll just save the note here. So that's really the flow. It's work through the competencies, review them, add notes if you think it might be effective. From here, the next step, very similarly, go through Jamie's goals, read through all of her progress updates, add notes if it might be helpful. And then the final step is a performance summary. Here's how she's done over the course of the entire year. If we'd like, we can build or pull in specific templates that ask us to answer other questions as part of the review conversation. I'll save that note as well. And then finally, we have a preview step. And then I'll just click ahead to get to the final step, which is finalizing the report. So if I'd like, I can share this with other team members to comment on. I can share it with Jamie for her to comment on her own performance. I can share it with other managers to comment on as well. And ultimately, if we'd like, we can actually download the report as a PDF and use that as the centerpiece of our conversation between Jamie and myself, which looks something like this. Again, a breakdown of all the competencies. We decided to include the scores when building it out, any notes that I provided when writing out the review, goals, and then ultimately the performance summary notes. Okay, very quickly, we'll also walk through the AI-enabled version just to show you what that looks like. So we'll create a review, same parameters, but in this case, we'll do AI instead of traditional. I'll click Next. And instead of me reading through all the reviews, all the feedback, providing my own notes, the system is essentially reading through everything and it's providing notes where it's able to. So in this case, I now have a fully written performance review. It includes performance summary for performance, recommendations, conclusion overall, and it's also doing that for other sections where there's enough data provided. And then again, I can hop through if I need to, or if I disagree with anything, or if I want to add any additional color. I can obviously edit these or delete them if they're not helpful, and go through and ultimately produce the final version of the performance review. Anyway, a couple other quick features, various levels of dashboards. From an administrative perspective, you have insight into the entire organization, how well our individual groups or departments doing, how well are team members doing overall and versus each other. So we have a breakdown of versus average of the organization, which a lot of teams like to leverage when it comes to merit increases, promotions, having a more objective viewpoint as opposed to just asking the manager what they think. This is a nice way of going about it. And some other breakdowns in terms of team member participation and overall reviews and feedback coming in. Various other aspects of the system include a larger, higher goals dashboard and a pulse feature. So if we want to, since we're already sort of surveying the team to some degree, if we would like, we can add our own pulse questions, add them in, and they're automatically scheduled to go out to the team. A lot of organizations do like quarterly NPS questions or other questions related to process and leadership. Anyway, that's my super quick run through of the overall WorkStory process. To summarize it all, basically, we help teams go from having more manual processes to a much more continuous and automated way of collecting the information. So not only are we getting more data, more feedback, we're able to share with team members over the course of the year and help them to sort of compound on their growth rather than waiting for the ultimate review conversation, which we also hope to make quicker and easier. Anyway, any follow-up questions, please feel free to send them to our team. Otherwise, happy reviewing. Thanks so much.